Hey everyone, we are back for another painting in our month of mountains. So this week we are combining beautiful splatter art with mountains, a lovely sky. We only use a couple of colors and we create a really beautiful piece of art. Now there is, it's important to have dry time in between each layering of the splatters. Otherwise it all turns into a little bit of a muddy mess. So we're gonna avoid that. We're gonna take our time with this one. The end result is so worth it. There's such a sense of satisfaction with painting an entire field of flowers with the mountains behind. I really love doing this, and I'm going to give lots of tips and tricks along the way. So I hope you enjoy this beautiful project. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the third installment of the painting mountains, a month of mountains. So we have been going, we started with something small, did several of these little basic ones of just using a couple of colors, and that was really fun. And then the last session together, we were incorporating the sun, either a sunrise, I think this is more of a sunrise, a little bit of flowers, and continuing just to look at, we had the background of mountains, but then we started to add a little bit of the foreground as well. And then this week, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be recreating this piece that I had done. And I even see improvements on this one that I want to make, but we're going bigger. So make sure you have a 9x12 is the size that I'm using and have it vertical. And right now, the first session, we're actually going to lay out the mountains, the sky, and then just a little bit of the foreground. We will be doing this in phases because we are going to incorporate some splatter art in the foreground, and so we'll need to do some layering for that. So if you have your paper all taped down, we are going to sketch out just a little bit. So we're going to sketch out a couple of mountains, and I'm going to go ahead. These are going to be some snow-capped mountains, so we're going to incorporate a little bit of that. And it's always interesting to me, like when I go and visit Lake Tahoe in the summer, which is about 90 minutes from me, and we'll be visiting in July, and yet it's so interesting because the top of the mountains of Lake Tahoe still have snow on them. While it's just a gorgeous, summer, high 70s. It stays fairly cool around there. So, okay, we want to make sure, and I think I'm going to, these mountains, they're going to be ascending a bit. So I've got one here, I've got a second one here. Let's maybe do a third one right here. And we're just going to have this one maybe a little bit more of an edge. And we're not gonna, I'm gonna grab my eraser. We do wanna make sure that we're keeping things pretty interesting. So most likely here the flowers went kind of halfway. I may actually move them up a little bit more just to keep it. I don't like to cut the page in half, so that's something I'm gonna do differently with this one. So we're gonna keep the mountains up here in the back, and I might have, maybe one right here. And let's do a fifth one, maybe having it come up here. Okay, so we have that, and then we have a path as well. So we're going to go ahead, and I am just going to sketch in a path, and we are going to have it go up and over to the right, and then I'm going to circle it a bit, and it will end up disappearing somewhere around here. I think on this one I'm going to have it go in, and this one I had it go out, but then your eye tends to go out, right? So we're going to do something a little bit. Okay. Excellent. All right, so we've got that going, and so now that we have that sketch done, let's go ahead, and I'm just looking up and get our paint ready. And really today we're just gonna be using a couple of colors. I do need to grab a brown from my other palette, but over here, this is one of the palettes I've been using that has mainly greens and blues, a little bit of yellow, which we're not going to use, but let's go ahead and lay down first our sky. So, and we're going to be real cognizant. If you want to, remind yourself we're going to do some snow and just do a little bit of sketching out that snow on the top. We can do that here, even these guys, and maybe, thinking too, there might be some other layers of snow. I always think it's interesting how it melts in different areas. And even maybe we'll make this mountain peak a little bit higher to show that it's also elevated, and putting in a little snow cap there. They don't have to be only on the top. Maybe on this one, it might be more on the side. Okay, so we have that down now, and of course we'll end up erasing the tops of the mountains, so that's going to be really fun. So you're not going to see any line, you'll just have the snow against the sky. So go ahead and get your brush ready. Now I have my favorite size, round tip, and this is a size 7, I believe. It's either 6 or 7, and I'm going to use that. But I also have been using a larger one for when I'm doing a little bit more of washes. And so if I have it around, there it is. Let me grab it. So this is just it's a bigger brush. I'm going to get it nice and wet. And I'm going to go ahead and get my sky ready. And I'm going to use a cerulean blue, which is a lighter blue. A cobalt blue will be very similar in the nice sky blue look. And we're thinking too, we're going into spring. I am getting more of a spring mindset. So why don't we go ahead and we're going to pretend that this is just the middle of the day. So we're not really seeing the sun either rising or setting, although there will maybe shadows, just because there's always shadows depending on things covering, right? Things shading over. That didn't come out quite right. So I'm just going to go ahead though and moving my brush, letting that paint move around. Now I'm going to add some more water and let the brush again move around, imagining maybe some clouds. I'm not worried about creating those clouds. I'm going to, with just creating the wetness, let the paint move around, and then I'm going to use a paper towel and do just a little bit of blotting. It might be fun to do some cloud studies, right? I really don't know too much about clouds. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just let things go pretty light. And if I see, I'm going to come back in here, I think a little bit, and just use a paper towel and dab, dab, dab around. Okay. Now, if you look at this too, I don't want it to settle totally. I'm going to move some of the paint around so we can create clouds and that it doesn't look like I had just a plain white area going all the way through. Okay, so we're going to just let that settle now. When we come back and we'll play with that more. Now let's again take that blue and we're going to go right under where our snow is. And we're going to go ahead and start adding in some blue here, because we're going to kind of create a bit of a cool blue, cool painting with our blues and our greens. And I'm just moving around here. Not worried too much. I'm not trying to even create an outline, but just letting things dry a little bit. I'm not creating it too wet is what I'm trying to say. So again, moving it through. You'll notice too, bring it in just a little bit, the paint's going to settle in some areas more than others. And we want to leave some white as well. That could be represent either patches of snow, but also letting watercolor do its magic, right? Okay, what I am next going to come back and do is right around the path, I'm going to go ahead and outline it with some blue. And if you have any, I have some eraser marks. I'm just going to pull those out. And we're going to go just like that. Okay, that looks really good. Now I'm going to come back out again, and you can see we've almost done some color blocking, and that's just with one color. So let's go ahead and pick up some green. I am going to be using a Hooker's Green Light. We have a permanent green, but I think that you can see even if on here, the Hooker's Green versus the permanent green over here, it's very spring looking, which is lovely, but I'm just feeling like it's still, these mountains look cold to me. So I'm going to be using that more cold green. Okay, so what you can do now is I'm going to get some water, and I'm going to go ahead and just start laying in some green on my mountain. And what I'm thinking too is we've gotten the warmth where you have this lush abundance of green as the snow has melted and there's been rain and it's been lovely. But we're not to the warmth of summer yet, right? We are it's a cold spring in this area. I lived in Boston just for a year, and I had never really experienced a severe winter growing up in California.
So, of course, the winter it was magical for me because I had never lived in snow before. And I was just I was not driving a lot, so I did not have to shovel the car out of the snow, which is always nice, right? Also, just side note, if you're seeing some of your paint pool, like over there, not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. Just let it kind of go where it wants to go, and we're going to let one of the fun things with this month of mountains, we're painting just slightly more abstract and really enjoying looking at the form and shape without getting too encumbered by details. One of the things, as I was mentioning about Boston, is that transition to spring. It is a cold transition, and it was so interesting as I got more excited for spring, but there's a lot more mud. And then the slushy snow that would kind of be hidden. It was really interesting. Yeah, definitely a very interesting experience. Really enjoyed the winter, but I was so happy when spring came because it was so, so cold. Okay, so this is nice. I like this. I'm actually going to go back in with some blue. I'm going to get a bit of a darker blue this time. I have a French ultramarine, but if you want to use cobalt again, that is fine too. And I'm just going to go ahead on some of the areas, imagine where we might have some shadowing, just some depths too, where it might be it's thicker. That darkness can show the thicker grass, and even up maybe close towards the mountain top. So just adding a little bit of blue, and that's just going to create a darker green. Also, if it looks flat anywhere, adding in some blue so we get variation of color. And then down at the base of the mountain, I am going to go and just lay in some paint right down here. We might end up putting a little bit of a path. I'm not sure, like we did in last week's. All right, so now that we have that there, we're going to go ahead, and I am going to go ahead and start taking a little bit of the green, not a lot, we're just doing a little bit of green, and almost we're going to lay in a little bit of grass, but not a lot. So we're going to do, and I'm already splattering, and we're not even to that part yet. Right up against the mountain base, but not quite. If you want to just lay in a layer of green, a very light wash, and then even come up to the road and put a layer over here. And I'm just laying this in really lightly with lots and lots and lots of white space. I don't want it all white, but what we're going to end up doing is doing some splattering and then pulling the paint down and creating this sense of a field. And actually, it's going to take quite a bit of time, which I think is just really relaxing to do maybe as you're watching a show or even talking with someone, maybe you're painting together. But we'll have to let this completely dry before we go on to that part. Okay, so again, I'm just going to take some more paint here, and then I'm going to come over on this side as well and do an edge of green all the way over here, and again some light. That was a little bit darker, but that's actually okay. Taking a little bit of blue up to the base of the mountain and going right along here. I'm trying to pull this base up a little bit because I didn't want to be halfway, which I think I am a bit halfway, but that's okay. That's fine. We're about maybe close to a third up, not quite. Okay, that looks really good. We're going to leave that alone. Now grab your brown if you have that with you. And I am going to grab a smaller brush this time and get my brown nice and wet. And I'm just going to do the path here. So I get my brown nice and wet and coming right up to the edge, and not straight, but maybe just moving around, almost a jagged edge. And just moving that around. And remember too, the path is normally going to get less detailed and lighter and smaller as we move more and more into the background. As we travel back, so we'll go up here, and maybe we're going to pretend it ends, well, at least the solid path ends. We might do some trickling. We might think too, this is still a bit wet up here, but maybe there's a path up and over the mountain. Hikers, maybe. That would be, I mean, the elevation on a mountain like that would be incredible, but we'll just do a little bit of a, you can see maybe a little bit of a dirt area, and I'm going to come back here. The nice thing with brown too is if you get a little bit of it in your green or your green into your brown, it's really not a big deal. And then I'm going to keep on going and just looking around here. So, okay, now if you are painting along with me, I'd love to know if this is similar to the color palette that you're seeing right now. Are you seeing any flowers come out, first of all? And it might be early for you depending where you live. I know for some of us we just get an earlier spring than others. Or is it still freezing and there's absolutely no green because everything is still covered with snow where you live? I am curious, so definitely let us know. Also, if you like the idea of blending more of the flowers with the mountains, or maybe do you just enjoy painting mountains and doing kind of the long range view? It's fun sometimes to incorporate other things into the mountains because it gives them perspective, like a tiny home, or the home is going to look tiny and just shows off the grandness of the mountain. So sometimes that perspective, for example, the path, helps with that. Another thing I thought of doing was maybe a river or a body of water. I've also been watching Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and the mountains, just the cinematography, and I'm sure some of it's probably CGI, but I believe some of the mountains were real too, but they're just absolutely gorgeous. Really is just beautiful, beautiful mountains. All right, and you can see too, I am not coloring it in. I am just letting some white show, and also I want it to look like a rough path. And what I'll end up doing too is if you want to grab some blue, going back and picking up some of the blue that you use, I'm going to pick up some of that ultramarine, and also I'm just going to let it kind of dance in here too. It won't look blue by the time it dries. It's all going to blend in. And somehow another color got into that brown. I can see some remnants, but that's okay. It is in there now. Nothing we can do to stop it. Okay, so I've got that now. That looks nice. I'm going to go ahead and I'm thinking, do I want brown anywhere else? I'm thinking potentially maybe just a little bit up here on my mountains. Maybe as we're seeing a rock formation. And again, this is nice too. That's my tip of my mountain there, because it shows that color combination. I know I was looking at a mountain range the other day, some pictures of mountain ranges, and they were all like tons of jagged edges, and it was a lot of dry area, and some green, but you could also see a lot of rocks sticking out. So we'll just put a little bit in here. I noticed too some of my coloring, it looks a little bit flat because of the way that it's drying, so we'll come back and add some more detail to that. But we do need to let it completely dry before we start adding the details of the splattering. So I'm actually going to give that a break. So here we are. We have been painting for about 17 minutes. I hope you're enjoying the way it looks. Even when I back up and peek on the camera, you can really start to see the depth, right, of some of these areas, which is actually really, really good. We want that depth in there. If you want to add a little bit more, I can take, for example, the green and let it sit in here at that base of this mountain. Not a lot, but just a little bit. Add a little bit of blue. I'd actually like to add a little bit of green to the blue over here. And looking at just some edges. Okay. Lovely. Okay, that looks really good. It's going to dry lighter than it looks now. It will maybe look a little bit too abstracty than you had in mind. That's okay. We're going to come back in and add some more details and change some things up, and it's going to be lovely. It's going to be absolutely lovely. Okay, so let your painting completely dry, and then I'll see you back here. Hey everyone, okay, so we're back and we are looking at our painting, which is now dry. We're going to start some splattering, but the first thing I just want to point out is I have erased all of my pencil marks. Oops, I see one right there. So if you haven't taken a moment, go ahead and erase all of the pencil marks now, and that way they're not going to show up. Now, if your painting's like mine, you might notice some water stains. That's fine. We're going to be adding in more depth of color to all of this. But again, first we're going to start doing with the splattering to where we're going to create those beautiful flowers. So go ahead. You're going to need a couple of things. Make sure you have some paper. And so I just have a couple pieces of watercolor paper that I'm going to be using to cover up, for example, the mountains. And I'm going to put like just like so. Nothing's wet underneath, so I'm not worried about splattering them. I also am probably going to want to cover up my road. So I am going to go ahead and just have only my foreground of the fields really exposed right now. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to start getting I'm going to get my water real wet. We're going to be using the same beautiful blues that we use for the mountains. So if you have a phthalo blue, ultramarine, a cerulean blue, all of those are going to be lovely. I am going to be starting with a phthalo blue. I'm getting all of my blues mixed up though really nicely, and I might pull in a little bit of ultramarine too. So I've got my blues nice and wet, and I am going to go ahead and I'm going to just go ahead and start splattering. And I'm not too worried about where the splatters are going. It's going to get some on the road. That's okay. If you have coffee nearby, actually have a cup of coffee, make sure you don't splatter in your coffee or dip the paintbrush in your coffee, because sometimes I will do that as I'm getting more water. So right there, actually, I ended up going in for the ultramarine first, and that's fine. I'm going to go for some phthalo now. And I am just splattering around. And remember, with watercolors, it's not going to stain. So if you get it on the table, we're just going to wipe it up after. So again, I'm doing lots of splattering. I'm going to get some more water. I'm going to get more splatters up here a little bit in the foreground. Okay, now what I'm going to do, we're actually going to do this a couple of times. That looks really good. So now what I want to do is go ahead and take some green. Grab some green. You're going to want, I'm not using too big of a brush, as you can see. I'm using like a 6. It's just a smaller brush. You can use an even tinier one if you wanted. What I'm going to start doing is in the back, I'm going to take the green and I'm going to start just creating fields, or really, you know, the stalks of our flowers. Now, this is pretty far in the back, so I want them to appear smaller. So if you feel like your stalks, your beautiful wildflower grass is too big, go ahead and grab a smaller brush and get that wet. So I'm going to go down. I have, oh, this one's a 6. So the other one was probably an 8. And again, I'm going to come over here and I'm just making, you'll notice it's not a straight line, and I'm going to pull some of the blue in. That's okay. But the lines, we're almost looking as if we could see the wave going through the grass. What we'll end up doing as well is we're going to come back in and we'll end up doing another splatter of blues. But right now, we want to get both going. And the blues will help, as we pull it into the green, actually helps darken things up. So again, this can take quite a bit of time. I'll end up turning off the recording for part of this, because otherwise you'll literally watch me just doing hundreds upon hundreds of these little strokes. And this is just a really fun project too if you are maybe listening to an audiobook or watching a movie. I think this is really, you know, just a fun way to do something with your hands and keep creating. I'm going to come over here as we continue to create this really beautiful meadow. Now you might see too where we can only go up so much before we start running into each other. What I mean by that is we want to make sure we've got to let it dry before I do the big ones in the front, because the ones in the front are going to be taller and bolder. So it is going to take a couple, we'll at least have to do a couple of dry times here. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and I am just pulling that through. Now I want to grab in some more blue, so I am going to go ahead, I'm going to pick up some of the cerulean and I'm going to come back here and I'm going to do another layer of the blue splatterings right on top. And this is really reminding me of a time when I went up to Lake Tahoe a couple years ago, and it was in July. It was pretty cool, but we were on a walk and we came across a field of lupines, and they were purple and blue. So we're keeping the colors a little bit more streamlined today, but it was absolutely beautiful. And it was such a contrast to the cold, right? Okay, so again, you're noticing too, I'm adding in some more green and coming back here, adding in some more fields in the back, and then I can even come up here and I can start working my way around. And we're going to continue to work. And as I see little dots, I'm attaching them to some of my flowers. And then we're going to do, again, we will be doing another layer of dots as well. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and let's take this off. So again, we're going to keep on playing with that, but I want to also show you, you can see too, we're adding in some more depth, which is really, really lovely. Let's go ahead, I like the sky quite a bit, but let's go ahead and work a little bit on our mountains, right? So we have some coloring that we'd like to do. Let's go ahead and grab our green. And if you want to put a little bit of blue in it so it's a little bit darker, and I'm going to just go up here and I'm going to be going around my snow-capped mountains. And where I'm noticing that I need to create either some more shadowing or just an evenness, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just working it through here. I'm going to grab some more green. Let me make sure you can see that okay. Good. Let me come in just a little bit. And you can see too where we want to create some effect of shadowing, right? We want to make sure too, so this is a mountain peak that's sticking out. I don't want to lay my hand down, but I do want to just bring this up and then just create that peak right there. So that looks good. So that's looking good on these mountains over here. I like that a lot. Okay, I'm going to come over here now too, and again, just working my way around each one of the mountains. Right over here. We had also created some paths, which have gotten a little bit faded, but I can come back over with my paths to pick up some brown. I'm going to walk around here and grab my other palette, pick up some brown, and let's make those paths a little bit more distinct. And so I'm going to lay it in right in here. That path was there. We had almost thought maybe there's a little path here. Maybe we even have a little path going up the side of the mountain, perhaps. I was talking with someone the other day who walked or who hiked. I'm going to put a little one in here too, just a little one in here. The Tahoe Rim Trail, which is the outer edges of all those mountains. It's 168 miles, I think she was telling me. It sounds like quite the adventure. Quite the adventure. Okay, I'm going to come back on this path. I will often look at those mountains and think to myself, what would it be like to hike them? It sounds incredibly beautiful, but you'd have to have a lot of stamina and determination, all the things, right? Okay, so now you can see I'm kind of moving into my path a little bit. I am going to add just a little bit of a blue to my path. I'm going to grab some, either your phthalo blue or your ultramarine, and just do up in here. I'm going to add a little bit of blue. That's going to just help for the depth, especially in the shadowing when we add in some of the flowers, because they would be covering the path and just adding a bit of shadow there. So we're going to be adding that. Now let's keep on going with our green as well. I'm going to pull my green in. If you're using another green, you might want to mix them together. If you have a lighter green, I'm going to come over here with this mountain. And again, we had the path went in just a little. Oh wait, let me think here. No, is that a mountaintop? Maybe it was. We're just going to make a little mountaintop here. How many mountains did I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. I thought I had just 5. We may have created a 6th mountain. That is fine. And if you want to cover up one of your mountain peaks, that is fine. We are very flexible here, right, as we're creating. Okay, so again, coming up to where the base of it is, I do want to probably create some sense of shadowing, some depth at the bottom of the mountain where there would definitely be some shadowing. So I'm just going to go underneath these paths. I'm not too concerned about making everything super distinct, because remember, we are working on just loosening up the painting a little bit, right? When we go back to our florals, we'll definitely be going back to more details, not with all of them, but for sure paying attention to the fine distinguishing details that make each painting, each flower beautifully unique. Okay, so this is looking good though. I'm liking this. I like the shadows here. I'm going to go right over here, adding a little bit more of the permanent green right in my mountains, and that looks really good. Okay, so we've got some mountains there. We've got some shadowing. It looks like I know I'm running out of my Hooker's green. I've got to go to my other palette, pick up a little bit right here. So I am really liking the way this is looking. Okay, so now that we have our mountains in the backdrop, we definitely want to create the sense of a little bit more distinction with our flowers here. I still have some green. I'm going to continue on, just adding in around the base my grass, my wild grass, and the stems for all of my wild flowers. And you can make this as big or as little as you want. Now, just to keep in mind too, they should probably be shorter, and as they come up, they should be getting bigger. If they're too wet, it will start to blend a little bit and almost look like it's all blending into one piece. And so that's what I do want to be aware of, be cognizant of, that we don't put so much paint that it all turns into a blur. What I am going to do now is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cover this up one more time. I'm going to put my eraser on the edge because I don't want to lay it flat against all that wet paint. And I will come back through here. I'm going to grab some more blue. I am going to grab the phthalo blue right now, so that's my brightest, coldest blue. And if I don't drop the paintbrush, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just start doing another layer of that lovely, lovely flowers. And I'm going to move this up just a bit because I actually want to get them higher up where I was putting the green grass. So we have a layer of flowers right on top. And if some get into my mountains, I am not worried about that. We will incorporate that in. We can either do it with a soft towel or something else. And I'll just pop that off. I'm just going to get a bit more water, but I'm not even going to really bother rinsing my brush. I'll just dip it back into the green and then once again come back and then just start making some more stems right around here. And just working my way around this edge now. And again, I'll take a break here and then I'll continue on. I'm going to go ahead and finish up and here, and then we will do one more session and just showing how to put those final touches, because there's definitely a way to bring it all together, especially the path. We want to add some distinguishing features there, and then the flowers that are right here. What I'm going to do is I'll end up doing quite a bit of longer, and I'll do a couple right here, longer stems like that right off the edge, and then we'll end up doing some leaf work even on them. Just again, they're the closest, so we want to show that. But I won't do this until I finish the rest of those, until I finished up in here. And then don't forget over here too, so we want to make sure that we're adding in our beautiful grass over here. And then once again, if you want to bring this over, grab some blue and then just do some splattering on this side again. Now if we're splattering on wet, it will get a little bit blurry. So if you want to wait for it to dry till you do this side, go right ahead, and you can see where it's getting a little bit blurry right there. But I'm not too worried about that. Okay. All right, you guys, I'm going to turn off the recording. I'll see you back here after I have finished taking my time of painting in all of the flowers. I think this is going to be really, really beautiful. I love the way this is turning out, and I'll see you soon. Okay everyone, so we're back. So I have been working, as you can see, of just really filling out all of the flower fields, and I was specific with this one. I wanted to really just use blues and greens with just a little bit of brown, and you can see too, I wanted to show you what I have done too with the mountains since we were last together. What I've done too is I have deepened, intensified the coloring around the mountains. I've added just a little bit of blue, you can see in here, to show the shadowing of where the snowy tops are. We've got our fields in there, our paths. I have darkened up the path, the brown path, and you may notice as you splatter that you get some speckles on your path. That's not a big deal at all, especially if they're blue. If you have that, go ahead and just grab a wet brush, and you can even get a little brown on it if you want, but you can just move your brush over. You'll notice a lot of the speckles will just dissipate. Also, you'll notice what I like to do too is if I'm thinking too of the shadowing, I like that path to have one edge is darker than the other, and you have different variations of color which I really think helps to add. Not only, it is supposed to get a little bit lighter as it goes in the distance, and this one is actually a bit intense, but that's okay. I can lift up a little bit of that paint, a little bit, and I'm not too worried about it. But really in here, I want that darker edge. So sometimes what I'll do too is you'll notice right here, make sure you can see this edge, I have some of the green that has bled into the path, and I'm not bothered by that at all. Really, again, we're coming towards the end where I'm looking at how I'm going to just finish up little fixes. I'm actually going to grab some green, and I'm sorry, not green. Let me rinse that out. A little bit of brown, and I am just going to wipe that along the path, and I'm even going to move it into the grassy area a little bit. That's not a big deal at all. I'll even put a little bit in the middle here. We're just going to pretend that this is a very well-worn and beloved path. Lots of people walking on it. Going right up to the edge here too with my brown, a little bit of a glaze there. So let's look at how I'm finishing up the flowers, and then I'll show you the preliminary painting I had done and some differences in between. So with the flowers, as I get closer and closer, on this one I decided to make them bigger, as if they were, again, we're coming up very close to them. They're bigger and they're getting smaller as we look into the distance, but it could be a field. So in my preliminary one, you can see this. Let me back off a little bit here. You can see that my colors are actually not quite as bold as here, so it's a little bit more faded. And in fact, I did a glaze over, I just took a light blue and green mix with a lot of water to kind of smooth out my mountains. And you can see the flowers too, that I really did a lot of splattering and a pretty heavy greenery. I left some white areas, which I think really helps to add to the depth, right? We can really look out in the field and see different patches of light and darkness. But I even up to the front, I didn't do too much shaping of my flowers. I did one last splatter so I could get that sense of those little wildflowers everywhere, and on this side as well. And you'll notice they're blending in a bit, but that really added, I thought, to the fun and the uniqueness of this piece. So with this one over here, I thought I would do something different just so you can see what you like and the differences you might like to do. So I'm going to bring this in a little bit closer here. You can see too, as I was just really playing with maybe making, after I had splattered, what I did is I just took some blue, and I'm going to take a little bit blue now. And in fact, I'm going to go grab some of the cerulean blue, the lighter one, and where there were splatters, I would just maybe add to them. And just not even, you can do almost like a little butterfly shape, and then a third one to make it a blossom. If you wanted to take some of these and make them almost like daisies, you could certainly do that. But you could really, there's a lot of room to play. But just thinking too of the wildflowers you see, maybe more of like a lupine. And then what I would do is I'm going to take, so if this was a lupine, I'd have some stems coming out on the sides, and then just making my stems and the stalks and the plants going down and just finishing up. Now I'm thinking too, this is a pretty light green that I'm using right now, so I'm either going to add some blue, whatever blue you were using, add that to the green that you're using, and that's going to create that nice darker color but without introducing a different hue, right? So we're keeping it all in the family as far as the hues and the colors that we're using, so they really all go together nicely. And you notice too, as I add more leaves in, we're just adding some more detail. And the depth of color, the different greens, I really add a lot. You want to have more than one green on your painting. And if you have a couple of different blues, like the cerulean blue, the phthalo blue, those both have different undertones to them. So the ultramarine blue does as well, has more red in it. So if you use those different blues and even one green and are mixing them together, you're going to get a lot of different shades of green, but they're all going to go together really nicely. And I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please leave a comment in the comment section and I will see if I can clarify that. But again, the fewer colors you use, it's just going to harmonize better, and yet it doesn't mean that you're going to have a dull painting. As you can see, we have a lot of vibrancy to this piece. We're using very few colors, and I love that. I love that discipline of seeing what you can do with a few things. It's very resourceful, And it can be very freeing when you feel, you know, you don't realize you don't have to have all the colors. Because going to the art store or the craft store, it's amazing how many different colors there are, right? There's tons of colors, and they're so beautiful. But if you use too many of them, a lot of times what can happen is because they all have different warmth and dark shades, cool and warm, different hues, different intensities, different reds and blues in their base, different amounts of yellow. It really can change up the painting. And we always want our paintings to sing. If we get the colors right, remember that. If you get the colors right, even a mediocre composition is just amazing because the colors really speak to us on a very deep, deep level. Okay, so again, this is looking really nice. So I'm probably about close to finishing with this one. What I will do is I will stop and let it completely dry, and then I'll most likely do one more just splattering, because that last splatter after it all dries just gives a really fun, fresh look to it. But again, you don't have to, that just depends on what you want. I do like to make sure that I do have that depth in. Another thing you can do if you're wanting to add some depth and you feel like you have just bunches of lines is take a green and then a little bit more water so it's not super dark. But what I can do, like in this area right here, let me pull in really close. So in this area right there, I have a spot where I can just take this and almost go across as if I am adding in some grass. And that's just going to thicken it up. And maybe I do that a little bit in here too. So once again, your eye's not going to go directly to that. But again, because it's lighter too, you can start to see how our eyes are moving through the field, right? Again, ideally, I want to be leading them around the path and then up the mountain. That's what I'm thinking, that we're going to go around these flowers if I was just walking by this painting. You'll also notice up here, or down here I should say, let me back up again, that right down here, I've left this area blank. I decided I just stopped the splattering and the flowers. I thought what might be nice is just like you've come into a meadow where it's like grass and then you burst onto the flowers, they all of a sudden just start, that we would do that here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add in right now some grass. I might need to let it dry so it doesn't all blend, but just a couple of different greens, but just again, showing some grassy area here. The whole thing doesn't need to be covered with flowers. And then I'll add in some grass right underneath here just to show a little bit more depth. And maybe you have one or two longer ones. And then over here, just make sure up at the road that this is pretty much filled in. We probably won't have a lot of light coming in that close. And again, have fun if you want to add leaves and be really, I'll bring it in a little bit closer. If you want to add some distinct leaves right in here, you'll notice, for example, like right in here, I'm just adding in some leaves. If it's too wet, you'll notice they just kind of blur, so just let it dry and then come back again. And then hopefully too, you'll kind of get a sense of, you know what, I think we're done. I think we're done. And so when you get that sense, stop. I know it can be hard sometimes, to walk away or to keep, this is a fun one though, because I think we're having a lot of fun adding splatters and colors. And you can see I'm just taking that light wash. I'm going back to the base of the mountain where really I would probably not have so much white. And I'm going and just adding in some color. It's probably going to also be, you saw I had splatters up here, so it is supposed to be darker anyways at the base. So I've just taken in some color. If I see some splatterings around, I'm not mad about that. That is just fine. Adding a little bit more color here and then just moving that down. If you see any water stains, just take some color in there. You might do a glaze just to wash over the whole mountain. So like here, it's a little bit wet. I might come back and do that over there. And that's looking really nice though, but I think this is about finished. Again, I'm gonna let it completely dry. And then I'll do maybe one more splatter of blue, but just a little bit. It won't be too much. I'll notice here maybe I need a little bit more green over here. Put in some more stalks. but I think it's pretty much finished. In fact, let's go ahead. In fact, it's just dry enough. I can even do a little bit of the detail work after I take it off the tape. But you can start to see too, this one can be really especially fun to take off the tape because you start pulling it off and you see that beautiful light edge, which I always think is so satisfying at the end, right? And this is on a 9x12, so I'll be able to frame this one fairly easily. I didn't get my tape quite even. We've got a little bit of a twisted edge down there, but that's okay. But you can even see it just comes off so nice, so beautifully. This is just a beautiful picture, I think, of a mountain scene. It's a field of flowers. I would certainly love to walk through and then just go hiking up on those mountains. I have loved painting this. This has been a lot of fun. Kind of a twist on our month of mountains by adding it a field of flowers, so I feel like we're doing a couple of things at the same time. And thank you for painting with me. Thank you for watching, and I will see you very, very soon.